In this video, I will walk you through the process of booting the Renesas RZG2L SOM module entirely from an SD card. This entails executing trusted firmware and U-boot from the SPI flash, while the kernel and root file system will be sourced from the SD card. So let's get started. First, you will need an SD card with at least 4 GB of storage. Insert the SD card into your PC where you have created the Yocto build for this MPU, because we will be using the artifacts that we created from the build, like this. So from here we will be using the kernel, device tree and root file system files, like these files. So let's detect our SD card on our PC. In my case, it has been detected as MMC BLK0. So delete any pre-existing partitions using fdisk command. So we will use D for deleting the partition, and again for deleting the second partition, and we will write W to write the changes to the disk. Now we can see that all of the pre-existing partitions are deleted. So next we need to create two partitions on the SD card. One partition would be for storing kernel and device tree binary, while the other one will contain root file system. So let's create the partition using fdisk command again. For a new partition, we will use n within fdisk command, and the partition type would be primary, and keep the partition number to default. Sector size should be default, and the total size for the first partition would be approximately 500 MB. So we will be using only 100 to 200 MBs, but to be on the safe side, we have created it for the size of 500 MB. So remove the signature, and it says that it has created first partition of Linux type. Same for the second partition. Keep the partition to primary. Partition number would be default. First sector size would be default, and the last size would be kept default because we want that rootfs could use the rest of the storage of the SD card. So we will keep it to default. Remove the signature, and here you can see we have created the second partition as well. So after creating both partitions, we need to change the partition type of partition 1 from Linux to FAT32 file system. For this, we will use T command within fdisk command. So it asks that for which partition we need to change the type. So we will go for 1. With L command, it will list all the options to change the partition types to. So from here, we need to switch it to FAT32. So we will give it B here. So now it says that it has changed the partition from Linux to FAT32 file system. To verify the partition table and to ensure that both required partitions are correctly configured, we will now list the partitions with -L option. So here you can see the first partition is of size 500 MB and is of FAT32 file system type, and partition 2 is for root file system and it will use the rest of the storage from SD card and type is Linux. So now we need to format the partitions. So for first partition, we will use make file system of vfat type, and -v for verbosity, -c check for checking if it has any bad blocks on the drive, and f flag for specifying the fat format, which can be of 32-bit, 16-bit or 12-bit. So we will give 32 here, and then the partition number. So now it will format the first partition to vfat32 file type. Likewise, we will do it for the second partition, but here we have to format it in the format of ext4 because we have to keep the root file system here. And we will label this partition to rootfs and then provide the name of partition. So it has now formatted the second partition as well. After formatting, remove and reinsert the SD card to mount the partitions automatically to the system. After inserting the card again, check the mount points. So here you can see for my SD card, the first partition is mounted to here and the second one is mounted to this partition with the label of rootfs. So let's go to the first partition. We will copy the device tree binary and kernel file here. So this is the device tree binary. We will copy it. In the same way, we will copy the kernel. So now we will go to the root file system partition. And here we need to unzip the root file system. So we will unzip this bz2 file extension and untar it in here. Now our SD card is ready and we can unmount its partition and remove the SD card from the PC. So now we need to start the board in SPI mode. For this, set switch 11 on the carrier board to QSPI mode. So the first three pins are off and the last one is on. And then set switch 1 on the SOM module to on, which is on in here, which will set the board to eMMC mode. After that, power on the board. Reset it and hit enter to enter the U-boot. Here we will set the boot arguments for the board to boot from the SD card. So for this, these are the boot arguments that we will set in the U-boot environment. In RZ series of Renesas, we have MMC0, which points to eMMC, while MMC1 is referred as SD card. So we will set the boot arguments to override kernel arguments to use partition 2 as the root file system, and then set boot command to set boot device to MMC1 here, and then load the kernel from MMC1 partition 1. This is the kernel image. And after that, set MMC1 and its partition 1 to load the device tree. And then boot the kernel from here. So we will now put these commands in U-boot environment. And then we need to save environment. So the new environment has been saved. So now insert the SD card on the carrier board slot. And reset the board to boot the Linux. So here we can see the kernel is up and running and systemd services are being loaded. Some of the services will fail because we do not have a graphical user interface. And then we need to log in with the root system. And there are some of the info logs for video and audio interfaces. So now we can run any command in here. And that's it. We have successfully booted the Linux on this evaluation port. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.